Star Trek, Primitive Passenger Season 5, Episode 8, Second Genesis. The observation deck of Empire North was silent, save for the soft hum of life support systems. Nolan Mercer stood before the viewport, watching as shuttles ferried supplies between the station and various cargo ships headed for the Federation. His reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a man deep in thought, his mind working through the complex web of relationships and responsibilities he'd built across two quadrants. "Computer, time," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "The time is 0:34:7 hours, came the prompt reply. Nolan nodded to himself. Another sleepless night. Since Kilana's rebirth, rest had become elusive. He'd left the adult Kilana, physically identical to the woman he'd known, but somehow fundamentally different, sleeping in his quarters. Her transformation was complete, her body mature. But something essential was missing between them, a connection that had been severed and poorly rejoined. Hilara entered the observation deck from the promenade, her holographic form moving with natural grace through the dimness. "You should be sleeping," she said, coming to stand beside him. "So should you," he replied with a half-smile. "Or whatever it is you do instead. I monitor station systems, analyze data, compose music, worry about you." Ilara's eyes met his in the reflection. "The first 5 former Borg on M272 have completed neural mapping. They're ready for the consciousness transfer whenever you give the word." "Good." Nolan's gaze returned to the view outside. "And Lexa? Still running combat simulations in the station's holodeck." Ilara's voice carried a note of concern. "She's been at it for 17 hours straight." Before Nolan could respond, the comm system chimed urgently. "Incoming transmission from Deep Space Nine," announced the night watch on duty from Ops. "Priority 1. Nolan straightened, instantly alert. "Rooted here." The viewport shimmered, transforming into a communications display. Captain Benjamin Sisko's face appeared, his expression thunderous. "Mercer," he began without preamble, "we need to talk about your recent activities in the Torvan sector." Nolan's brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "Torvan sector? I haven't been anywhere near." "Save it," Sisko cut him off. "We tracked the energy signature of your weapons systems. The attack on the Dominion cloning facility yesterday has thrown the entire sector into chaos." Nolan crossed his arms, his posture shifting from confused to defensive. "Look, Captain, I don't know what intelligence reports you've been reading, but my ships have been nowhere near the Torvan sector." "Then perhaps you'd care to explain why debris from the facility contains trace elements consistent with your drone weapons." Sisko's eyes narrowed. "Or why Starfleet intelligence intercepted Dominion communications, specifically referencing Mercer's forces." "I can't explain what I don't know about," Nolan replied, his tone hardening. "But I assure you, if someone's using my tech or my MAME without authorization, I'll handle it." "See that you do," Sisko said, leaning forward. "We had an operation planned to take out an entire Cardassian shipyard in the adjacent system. An operation we had to scrub because the Dominion shifted all their assets to respond to this attack." Nolan's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of doubt crossing his mind, though his expression remained steadfast. "I'll look into it. I'd appreciate that." Sisko's expression remained severe. "This war affects all of us, Mercer. Independent operators like yourself might have the luxury of picking your battles, but coordinated efforts are what will win this thing." "I'm well aware of the stakes, Captain," Nolan responded coolly. "If there's a problem on my end, I'll deal with it." Empire North, out. The transmission ended, leaving Nolan staring at his own reflection once more. Beside him, Ilara stood silent, processing the implications of Sisko's accusation. Nolan stared out at the stars, his face a mask of controlled concern. If someone was acting in his name, the implications stretched far beyond an angry call from DS9. It meant he had lost control of something, or someone, close to his operation. And in wartime, that kind of vulnerability could be fatal. Acesti, The gentle hum of terraforming equipment provided a constant backdrop to the once barren valley on M272. Where there had been only rock and dust months ago, now stood a collection of elegant structures, living quarters, research facilities, and a medical center that rivaled anything in the quadrant. The colony of former Borg had transformed their small piece of the planet with remarkable efficiency. Nolan stood on a ridge overlooking the settlement, watching as residents moved between buildings with purpose. Most appeared to be in their early 20s, their bodies lithe and unmarked by the cybernetic implants that had once defined their existence. Only in their eyes could one see the shadows of their former lives, old souls gazing out from young faces. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" came a melodic voice behind him. Nolan turned to see Javina approaching. The Andorian woman moved with the fluid grace that all the reborn former Borg seemed to share, a lightness that came from bodies unburdened by pain. Her blue skin caught the morning light, her white hair swept back in an intricate braid that revealed delicate antennae. She touched the soft skin around her left eye, where a Borg ocular implant had once been embedded. As much as she hated it, it still seemed strange now that it was gone. "Every time I visit, there's something new," Nolan replied, gesturing toward a large geodesic dome under construction at the far end of the valley. "What's that going to be?" "An agricultural research center," Javina said, coming to stand beside him. "We're developing specialized hybrids suited to this planet's soil composition." Her antennae twitched slightly. An Andorian smile. "Many of us were scientists before assimilation. Those skills remain, even in new bodies." "And how is your new body treating you?" Nolan asked, studying her face. Javina stretched her arms above her head, a display of pure physical joy. 3 months since my rebirth, and I still marvel at the absence of pain. For 20 years after my escape from the collective, every movement caused discomfort as my body rejected the implants. She met his gaze directly. "You've given us more than new bodies, Mercer. You've given us futures." They began walking down the path toward the settlement, passing several young-looking residents who nodded respectfully at Nolan. "The 5 candidates for today's procedure are ready," Javina continued. "Ilara has been reviewing their neural scans all morning, and they've all made their choice." About memory retention, Javina's expression grew more solemn. 3 have chosen to retain all memories. 2 have opted for erasure. She stopped. "It's not a decision anyone makes lightly, but for some, the memories of their assimilation are too painful. For others, it's the memories of assimilating others." They reached the medical center, a low structure of gleaming white material that seemed to capture and amplify the sunlight. Inside, the air was cool and clean, the gentle beeping of monitoring equipment providing a rhythmic counterpoint to the soft voices of medical staff. In the central chamber, 5 cloning pods stood in a semicircle, each containing the developing form of a humanoid body. Beside each pod, a biobed held an older individual, their bodies marked by the scars of removed Borg technology, some with missing limbs, others with exposed neural pathways where implants had been forcibly extracted. Ilara stood at the main console as she adjusted parameters on the display. She looked up as they entered. "The neural patterns are stable," she reported. "All 5 consciousness matrices have been prepared according to their specifications." Her eyes lingered on one of the biobeds, where a heavily damaged Bolian man lay unconscious. "His original neural tissue is deteriorating rapidly. If we're going to do this, it needs to be soon." Nolan nodded, moving to examine the readouts. "Let's begin with him, then." "What's his story?" "Tolak," Javina supplied. "He was a botanist on Boris Nikes before his assimilation 12 years ago. After the cube he served on was destroyed by Starfleet, he managed to escape in a damaged scout vessel." Her voice softened. "The disconnection from the collective was traumatic. He performed self-surgery to remove his vocal subprocessor, but caused significant damage to his larynx and facial nerves. and his choice regarding memories. Complete retention, Javina replied. He wants to remember everything, both to honor those he couldn't save and to ensure he never forgets the horror of what the Borg represent. Nolan studied the unconscious man, noting the cruel patchwork of scars and half-removed technology that marked his blue skin. In the adjacent pod, a perfect Bolian body floated in nutrient solution, unmarked by trauma, waiting to receive Tolak's consciousness. "Start the transfer sequence," he instructed Ilara. Ilara nodded, her fingers dancing across the console. The room's lighting dimmed slightly as power diverted to the consciousness transfer matrix. A soft blue glow emanated from the apparatus surrounding Tolak's head, pulsing in rhythm with his brain activity. "Neural pattern obtained," Ilara announced. "Beginning transfer to receptor matrix." On a display above the console, a three-dimensional representation of Tolak's neural pathways appeared, rotating slowly as the system mapped every connection, every memory, every aspect of what made him uniquely himself. "Pattern integrity at 98%, Ilara continued. "Commencing integration with clone neural tissue." The blue glow intensified, now extending to encompass the cloning pod. Within, the young Bolian body trembled slightly, its brain activity spiking as it received the transferred consciousness. "Tolak's original neural activity is declining," Javina noted, watching the monitors. "His body is shutting down." "Expected," Ilara replied without looking up from her work. "The consciousness transfer creates a vacuum effect in the original neural tissue. It's a natural part of the process." Nolan watched as the monitors tracking Tolak's original body showed declining vital signs, while the clone's readings strengthened. It was a strange phenomenon. Death and rebirth occurring simultaneously. The essence of a person flowing from one vessel to another like water being poured between cups. "Transfer complete," Ilara announced after several tense minutes. "Clone vital signs stabilizing." The blue glow faded, leaving the room in its normal lighting once more. On the biobed, Tolak's original body lay still, the monitors flatlining one by one. In the pod, the young Bolian's eyes fluttered beneath closed lids, his breathing deep and regular. "Begin post-transfer awakening sequence," Nolan instructed. The fluid in the pod began to drain away as medical staff moved into position. The transparent cover slid back, revealing the newly awakened Tolak. His eyes opened, confused at first, then widening with wonder as he raised his hands before his face, examining the smooth blue skin unmarked by implants or scars. "Welcome back," Javina said softly. Tolak's gaze found hers, recognition dawning. He opened his mouth to speak, then paused, seemingly shocked by the absence of pain that had accompanied speech for so long. He began, his voice young and clear. "I remember everything." His fingers traced his face, finding only smooth skin where metal had once protruded. "But the pain is gone." "That's the idea," Nolan said, stepping forward. "New start, same consciousness." Tolak looked at his original body on the biobed, his expression a complex mixture of emotions: grief, relief, gratitude, and something like awe. "Thank you," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "Thank you." As medical staff helped Tolak from the pod and wrapped him in a warming blanket, Nolan turned to Ilara. "One down, 4 to go," he said quietly. "Let's continue." Ilara nodded, already preparing the next transfer sequence. Beside her, Javina checked the vital signs of the remaining candidates, her blue fingers moving with practiced efficiency across the controls. "They'll all make it," she assured Nolan. "They've endured far worse than this process." Nolan watched as the next former Borg was prepared for transfer. A Vulcan woman whose encounter with the collective had left her without eyes, the ocular implants having been removed but the damage beyond repair. In her pod, a perfect Vulcan body waited, complete with functioning eyes that would soon see for the first time in decades. "This is good work," he said softly, almost to himself. "No matter what else happens, this is good work." Javina touched his arm briefly, a gesture of understanding. "You've given us back our future, Mercer." Whatever your reasons, whatever your past, this is your legacy. As the second transfer began, Nolan found himself hoping she was right, that when all was said and done, this act of creation would outweigh the destruction that seemed to follow him across the stars. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the medical center's observation area as Nolan and Javina stood beside a biobed. On it lay Pren, a benzite male whose once blue complexion had faded to a sickly gray around the areas where Borg implants had been removed. His breathing apparatus, a necessity for benzites outside their home atmosphere, had been partially integrated with Borg technology, creating a grotesque hybrid of organic necessity and mechanical invasion. "I've reviewed the genetic sequencing results 3 times, Javina said, her voice soft with regret. The cloning matrix simply cannot stabilize his unique respiratory requirements. Pren's eyes, one natural, one a crude replacement after his ocular implants removal, focused on Nolan. "I suspected as much," he said, his voice raspy through the damaged breathing device. "Benzite physiology has always been complicated." Nolan leaned against the edge of the biobed, meeting Pren's gaze directly. "We're not giving up. The Tima is consulting with specialists on Benzar about modifications to the process." "Don't waste resources on me," Pren replied with surprising gentleness. "Others need this gift more urgently." He gestured toward his body. "I've lived with this shell for 15 years since escaping the collective. I can manage a while longer." Javina checked the monitoring equipment, adjusting something on Pren's breathing apparatus. "It's not just his respiratory system," she explained to Nolan. "The consciousness transfer matrix can't properly map his neural pathways. The board made extensive modifications to accommodate his breathing functions, integrating control mechanisms directly into his frontal lobe." "In simple terms," Pren added, "my mind and my breathing are too intertwined. Transfer one without the other, and I suffocate. Keep both, and the clone body rejects the neural patterns." His damaged eye blinked independently of his natural one. Quite the puzzle. Nolan crossed his arms, frustration evident in his posture. "There has to be a solution." "Perhaps eventually," Javina acknowledged. "But Pren isn't the only one facing compatibility issues. Approximately 18% of our population cannot undergo the procedure with our current technology." She gestured toward a separate ward where other former Borg with more severe damage rested. "Some have neural damage too extensive for accurate mapping. Others have physiologies too alien or too drastically altered by the assimilation process." "They don't resent us," Pren said, noting Nolan's expression. "Those who can be saved should be. The rest of us," he paused, considering his words carefully, "we find purpose in other ways." "Pren oversees our agricultural development," Javina explained. "His modifications, while painful, allow him to analyze soil compositions with remarkable accuracy." "Making use of what the Borg left behind," Pren said with a hint of pride. "Adaptation, after all, is what life does best." Nolan nodded slowly, respecting the benzite's pragmatism while inwardly resolving to continue searching for solutions. He'd seen too many impossibilities overcome to accept defeat so easily. "I should check on today's transfers," Javina said, glancing at a nearby chronometer. "The Vulcan woman, Taprina, will be awakening soon." "Go," Nolan told her. "I'll join you shortly." As Javina departed, Nolan remained by Pren's bedside, studying the complex monitoring equipment. "You're thinking of solutions," Pren observed. "I can see it in your eyes." "Force of habit," Nolan admitted. "A good habit," Pren replied. "But don't let it blind you to what's already been accomplished." He gestured toward the window, where young bodies once broken by Borg technology now moved with ease through the colony. 100 successes against 20 failures is still a miracle by any standard. Nolan's gaze followed Pren's toward the window. "When did you escape the collective?" 14 years, 7 months, and 23 days ago," Pren answered without hesitation. Our cube was investigating an anomaly in the Gamma Velorum system when it encountered a quantum filament. The damage severed my connection to the collective. And you've been waiting all this time for a miracle. Pren's expression softened. Mr. Mercer, I stopped waiting for miracles the day I realized I was finally free to think my own thoughts again. Everything since then, every moment of independent existence, has been the miracle. He adjusted his position slightly, wincing at the movement. These new bodies you're providing? They're wonderful, certainly, but they're not the first gift you've given us. What was the first? Nolan asked. Hope, Pren said simply. When you established this colony, when you showed interest in helping us rather than fearing or exploiting us, that was the true miracle. His damaged eye whirred softly as it refocused. Damaged bodies can be endured. It's damaged spirits that destroy us. Nolan nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. I'll keep working on solutions for you and the others. I know you will, Pren replied, and we'll keep building this colony, with or without perfect bodies. That's our part of the bargain. The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from Nolan's comm badge. Ilara's voice came through clearly. Nolan, T'Prina's awakening has begun. You might want to be present. On my way, Nolan responded. He looked back at Pren, offering a slight bow of respect. We'll talk more later. I look forward to it, the Benzite replied. Now go witness another miracle. Someone should appreciate them properly. As Nolan left the observation area, he found his thoughts drifting to Kilana and her transformation. Another miracle of sorts, but one that had left more questions than answers. Perhaps witnessing T'Prina's awakening would provide some insight into the complex nature of rebirth and identity that now occupied so much of his attention. The command center of the Havoc was silent, save for the soft glow of monitoring displays and the gentle hum of life support systems. Nolan sat alone at the main console, the blue light from the displays casting shadows across his face as he accessed the ship's logs. Computer, display all Maldor flight logs for the past week. Authorization, Mercer Alpha 6-4. The screen flickered, rows of data appearing in neat columns. Nolan's eyes scanned the entries, searching for irregularities. There, a 12-hour reconnaissance patrol, authorized by Lexa 3 days after their joint mission to the Dominion battlecruiser. Display complete telemetry for that patrol, he commanded, leaning forward. A star map materialized on the screen, showing the Maldor's course. A blank request to the Torvan sector, specifically to the coordinates of the Dominion cloning facility that Sisko had mentioned. The ship had lingered in the area for nearly 4 hours before returning to Empire North. Nolan's jaw tightened. Access weapons, discharge logs for that mission. More data filled the screen, detailed records of drone deployments, weapons fire, and transport activity. The pattern was unmistakable, a systematic assault on the facility executed with brutal efficiency. Nearly 200 Gem Hadar and Vorta personnel eliminated. The facility itself destroyed by a device matching the signature of his own Genesis bombs. Computer, was this mission logged in the official deployment registry? Negative. Mission classified as routine reconnaissance. No combat parameters were found. Nolan sat back, running a hand through his hair. The nagging feeling that had persisted since Sisko's call was now confirmed. Lexa had returned to the cloning facility and destroyed it completely, acting on her own authority, using his resources, his technology, his name. Computer, locate Lexa. Lexa is currently in operations on Empire North. Nolan closed the logs, his decision made. This couldn't wait. Lexa had crossed a line, potentially endangering everything he'd built. The alliance with the Federation, tenuous as it was, provided protection his independent operation needed during wartime. If Sisko couldn't trust him to control his own people, he tapped his comm badge. Mercer to Ilara. Ilara here. Meet me in Ops in 20 minutes. We need to talk about Lexa. There was a brief pause. Understood, Ilara replied, her voice carrying a note of concern. Nolan stood, taking one last look at the damning evidence on the screen before closing the display. The Moldor's logs told a clear story, one of an intelligence evolving beyond her programming, developing not just autonomy but a taste for violence that had moved from tactical necessity to something darker. As he headed for the transporter pad, Nolan felt the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. Lexa was, in many ways, his creation. Her growing bloodlust, her independent actions, they reflected on him. And now they threatened everything he had worked for. It was time to rein her in before she started a war he couldn't finish. The ambient lighting of Nolan's quarters had dimmed to its night setting, casting the spacious room in soft blues and grays. Outside the viewport, stars glittered against the endless void, pinpricks of light in a sea of darkness. In the center of the room, a large circular bowl-shaped bed dominated the space. Nolan and Kilana lay entwined, their bodies fitted together with physical perfection. He stroked her hair, so familiar in texture and scent, while she traced patterns on his chest with delicate fingers. "Today went well," she murmured, her violet eyes meeting his. 5 more former Borg, reborn. "You should be proud." "I am," he replied, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. "Javina has built something remarkable there." "You built something remarkable," Kilana corrected, pressing closer. "Your resources, your protection, your vision." Nolan smiled, but something in his eyes remained distant. "Our vision. The consciousness transfer matrix wouldn't exist without your expertise." "My previous self's expertise," she corrected gently. "I just inherited the knowledge." The words hung between them, a reminder of the strange liminal space they occupied, both together and apart, both connected and divided by the act that had created this new Kilana. She leaned up, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was technically perfect. The right pressure, the right movement, exactly as her predecessor would have done. Nolan returned the kiss, his hand cupping the back of her head, pulling her closer, as if proximity could bridge the ineffable gap between them. They broke apart, smiling at each other with practiced warmth, and settled into the sheets. Kilana nestled against his chest, and Nolan's arm wrapped around her protectively. To an observer they would have appeared the picture of contentment, 2 lovers drifting off to sleep in each other's embrace. Minutes passed. Kilana's breathing slowed, becoming deep and regular. Carefully, she rolled away from Nolan, turning to face the viewport across the room. Her eyes remained open, watching the stars with an expression of quiet longing. Beside her, Nolan lay motionless, staring at the ceiling. His eyes held no drowsiness, only a weary sadness. The space between them on the bed seemed to expand, becoming a gulf wider than mere physical distance could measure. In the silence, they lay apart, each alone with their thoughts, each wrestling with questions of identity and connection. The woman who had chosen rebirth to love him more completely, now unable to bridge the gap her transformation had created. The man who had welcomed her return, now struggling to find the woman he had known in this perfect copy. The stars continued their silent watch, as 2 people who should have been as close as any in the galaxy lay side by side, separated by the thinnest yet most impassable of barriers. The knowledge that something essential had been lost in translation between one life and the next. Epilogue. Sunlight streamed across a simple bedroom, not the stark utilitarian quarters of the Havoc, nor the luxurious chambers of the Empire North, but a genuine home wood beams across the ceiling, hand-woven blankets on a bed, windows that opened to real air and sunlight. In the bed lay an elderly Nolan Mercer, his onsy dark hair now a wild mane of white, his face weathered by decades of life and lined with the evidence of both laughter and sorrow. His eyes, still sharp, still penetrating, followed the movements of Alara as she adjusted monitoring equipment beside him. "How's it look, Doc?" he asked, his voice thinner than in his prime but carrying the same wry humor. "Your vitals are stable," Alara replied, her appearance unchanged by the decades that had transformed him. Nolan nodded, his gaze drifting to the window where trees swayed in a gentle breeze. Strange, isn't it? After all this time, all we've seen. He gestured weakly at his aged body. To choose this, to choose an ending. It was your choice, Ilara said softly, sitting beside him on the bed. To experience a human lifespan. To age naturally. Best decision I ever made, he said, reaching for her hand, even with the aches and pains. His eyes met hers, suddenly serious. I wanted to thank you, Ilara, for being there through all of it, for helping me understand what it means to be human. I wouldn't have missed it, she replied, squeezing his hand gently. But after, when this body is gone, his voice faltered. You'll go on, without me. That was always going to happen, Nolan, she said gently, even if you'd stayed in your enhanced form. I know, he whispered, his voice breaking, but now it's real. Now it's happening. His grip on her hand tightened. What will you do when I'm gone? When centuries have passed and everyone who knew us is dust? Ilara's expression softened. I'll remember. Everything we did. Everyone we saved. The colony on M272. The wars we fought. The peace we helped build. She brushed a strand of white hair from his forehead. I'll keep our story alive. Tears welled in Nolan's eyes as the enormity of eternity, her eternity without him, crashed over him. His breath came in short gasps as panic rose in his chest. I can't, he whispered, suddenly terrified. I can't leave you alone for eternity. I can't. The sunlit bedroom dissolved, replaced by darkness. Nolan sat bolt upright in his bed on Empire North, his body drenched in cold sweat, heart hammering in his chest. The horror of the dream of leaving Ilara to face endless centuries alone still gripped him, a soul-deep dread that left him gasping. Ilara, he called out, his voice breaking in the darkness. The crushing weight of separation, of inevitable loss, pressed down on him with unbearable force. The darkness softened as Ilara's voice breached the silence. I'm here, Nolan, she said quietly. I'm always here. In the silence that followed, Nolan's breathing slowly steadied, the nightmare's grip loosening. But the question it had raised of time and eternity, of connection and its inevitable end, lingered unanswerable in the vast darkness between stars.